have your... Yeah, okay. Are we ready? All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to America House. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's lovely to see you all here. I'm Christiane. I'm the director here at America House, and it is my honor to introduce you to our esteemed speaker this evening. We have a real treat for you tonight, and I'm so glad you could join us. Jason Best is the co-founder and principal of Crowdfund Capital Advisors, where he co-authored the crowdfunding investment framework that's used in the Jobs Act to legalize equity and debt-based crowdfunding in the U.S. He also works with angel groups, private equity, and venture capital firms, as well as governments and NGOs, including the World Bank, to understand the crowdfunding ecosystem and create successful crowdfunding investing strategies. Jason has spoken at the White House, at South by Southwest, at TEDx, at the World Bank's Global Forum on Innovation and Technology Entrepreneurship, and the Angel Capital Association. He is the co-author of the Crowdfunding Investing for Dummies book, where you can get started, and a contributor to TechCrunch and VentureBeat, and he's appeared on Fast Company, Bloomberg Markets, and on CNN. In fact, Forbes named Jason one of the 10 most influential people in crowdfunding today. So tonight, we've invited Jason to demystify the world of crowdfunding and share his top tips for success. We're very grateful to the U.S. Embassy for making his visit possible through the U.S. Speaker Program. And so please join me in welcoming Jason Best.
Thanks, everybody. The microphone working well? Good. Thank you all for coming out tonight. There's lots of places you could be. I appreciate you taking a little bit of time to learn about crowdfunding. What I want to do is kind of move through these tips fairly quickly to give plenty of time for questions at the end. We can make this a very interactive kind of a session. You can see I don't get any points for creativity in my slides. It doesn't get any better than this. But I think she talked a bit about my background. My background also includes the fact that before I got involved in crowdfunding and trying to change laws to make it easier for people to raise capital, I've been an entrepreneur myself. I've lived and worked in San Francisco for about 15 years, working in different technology companies. And so I know firsthand how hard it is to start a company. I know what it's like to raise money as a startup. And so it was because of those frustrations and challenges, that even in San Francisco it's hard to raise money. And where I grew up, where I'm originally from, is from a very rural place, a small town in a rural state in the United States called Louisiana, which is in the south of the United States. And there's no access to capital. The town I grew up in had about 20,000 people. And so this challenge of access to capital is a real one, and we want to make sure that we can broaden that base as much as possible. The first thing to understand about crowdfunding is when you're raising money for a business, it's always difficult. There's no easy way to raise money. This is just a new way to do a difficult thing. This is a new way for you to get access to capital that your business needs. And that it's going to require transparency, maybe more transparency than you might feel comfortable with initially. Communication, planning, execution, both before, during, and after the campaign. I think it's important when you think about raising money for your business. People talk about it like it's an event that occurs like at this one particular moment in time. But what's really happening is when you get investors in your business, it's like you're getting married. But there's no divorce from an investor. So you're getting really, really married. And so you have to think about what this means for your business over time. And how are you going to communicate with your new spouse? How are you going to negotiate with your spouse? How are you going to create opportunities for success in the long term? And this is how you need to kind of think about it. So the next thing to think about, number 2, is really like, what are the different types of crowdfunding? So you have various types of crowdfunding, and they are for different purposes. How many of you guys have either contributed to a crowdfunding campaign or run a crowdfunding campaign yourself? Okay, a few people, cool. So these are really the 5 types of crowdfunding. First is, and you really need to think about what kind of project or business you have and what you're going to do, so you can know what the best kind of campaign or best kind of platform you should use. So GoFundMe obviously is for donations, for people looking for money for charitable causes strictly. Rewards-based crowdfunding is Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and there are other platforms as well, but those tend to be the two largest. Those are for, let's say if you're an entrepreneur and you have a prototype and you think you have a product that people should want, there should be a market, but you don't have enough money to have that product produced. This is a way for you to pre-sell your product. So there was one of the most successful crowdfunding campaigns on Kickstarter was a project for an ice chest you could take camping to keep things cool. But in addition to it being just an ice chest, it had a blender to make frozen drinks. It had a way to charge your cell phone. It had a way to have speakers for your music, for your, Bluetooth for your iPod. It had all these different gadgets attached to it, and it sold very well. So this company created a prototype for this business, put it on Kickstarter, and they raised $13 million pre-selling their coolers. So in total, between Kickstarter and Indiegogo, those two platforms have raised over $3.5 billion US for people pre-selling products globally. Debt-based crowdfunding is exactly what it sounds like. This is when you, as a small business owner, are looking to you need to raise money through debt for your business. Obviously, if you're going to raise debt capital, you need a way to pay it back. So you need cash flow. You need to be kind of a business that has cash flow and has profits that can service a debt for your business. Funding Circle is in the UK, very successful platform. Aux Money is in Germany, that is available as well. And then for technology startups or companies that are pre-revenue or pre-profit that are looking for seed capital or Series A capital, kind of businesses, money to get started or to help grow your business before you have profits. Equity crowdfunding, where you're exchanging shares of your business, equity position in your business, for the capital people are giving you. It's like, think about it as you're looking for angel investors or micro angel investors for your business. And the two most successful platforms in the UK are Crowdcube and Seedrs. And so with all of these platforms, what you're doing is you are making a video and providing as well financial information and disclosure information, business plans about what you plan to do with your investors' money. Because you're asking them for money and you need to demonstrate what you're going to do with it. Obviously, with the donation, it's basically just you're asking for a need and you're hoping for charity. Rewards, people are typically pre-purchasing a product, so that's pretty simple. It's like a transaction, but you're just paying for it in advance. But debt and equity, that's a financial investment. And so there's a much higher requirement for the amount of information you have to give, the amount of communication you have to have, and the amount of disclosure that you have to have in those situations. We could talk more about that later. Now, ICOs, internet coin offerings, is basically blockchain crowdfunding. And that's going to really people have started doing that in the last few months, really just this year. It's gotten to be very kind of popular, happening in lots of places. And we can talk more about that as a separate thing, but it's a way to use virtual currency, Bitcoin or Ethereum, to raise capital. It's a much more complicated transaction. Some places it's illegal, some places it's legal, but it is happening out there and it is kind of considered one of the forms of crowdfunding. So this is really important. People think about crowdfunding, again, they think about it like an event, like it's something I'm just going to now crowdfund. But what's required is a lot of planning. And if you don't plan, you will fail. If you don't really think through what you're doing in advance, because the crowdfunding period at time that you're actually raising money tends to be between 4 weeks and 8 weeks and to raise the money. And you have to do a lot of things in that period of time. And so to do it well, you need to plan in advance. And over again, we've seen people who thought they could raise money quickly and easily, but failed because they did not plan adequately. And a lot of the rest of this presentation is really about the things you need to do to plan effectively to be successful. So the questions in thinking about how to think about in deciding which type of crowdfunding you want to use, this really kind of come down to my next tip, which is in advance thinking about, number one, how much money do I need to raise? And that's really important, because that will help you understand which one of these tools you should use in raising capital. Number two is, how will you use the funds? Will you use them to hire people to expand your operations so you have a second or third location of your business? You're going to spend it on attorneys for intellectual property protection. Number three is what type of business do you have? Are you a technology startup that's really pre-revenue and you're trying to learn how to grow that business? Or are you a traditional business that wants to raise capital from your current community and your current customers to maybe expand into a new city or grow your traditional business? What stage is your business? Do you have revenues today? Do you have customers today? How much are you planning to grow in the future? And then what is the growth potential for your business? Because for people who are lending money, they assume they're going to be getting their money back at a fixed rate of interest at a fairly low risk. Whereas businesses that have potential for high growth may use equity capital to raise capital. And then what is the risk profile of your likely investors? Because some potential investors may be willing to go into a high risk opportunity. Other investors are not. You may have customers or you may have people in your social network that are not willing to put a high level of risk into a business. And so you have to understand what your investor base looks like, because different countries, different cities, different industries, different communities have different level of risk tolerance. And so that's going to be an important consideration in thinking about who really is going to invest in my business and how. So one of the things that will help you really to make those decisions from the last slide are studying at least 10 other crowdfunding campaigns that have happened either in your industry or your geography or the type of business that you're doing, right? So really, because what you're going to learn from the campaigns that have been successful, and you're also going to learn a lot from campaigns that failed. What I found is that, and you want to look at what did they do right and what did they do wrong in your mind? How did they succeed and fail? What I've also found interesting is many times if you contact those campaign owners, the people who did those campaigns, whether they succeeded or they failed, many times they're willing to talk to you about it, or at least answer a couple of questions in an email. Because you can learn a lot from just looking at the site and looking at their campaign online, but also the ability to actually ask them a few questions could be really, really powerful. And their willingness to share the information with you, usually they will. So really taking the time to study what they did right and what they did wrong, and thinking about that, if you were in their shoes, how could you make adjustments to your campaign, or how will it change your thinking about how you want to go about raising this capital? So number 6 is kind of starting with an obvious point. You can't crowdfund without a crowd. And I say that because you cannot expect that I'm going to bring my business, the campaign I want to raise money for, I'm going to bring it to a crowdfunding platform or a website. They're not going to provide all your investors for you. They're going to have people who will invest, but the majority of the investors in your campaign, statistically speaking, it's about 80%, are going to be people that you know or someone you know knows. They will be your customers, your friends, your relatives, friends of friends. Those are the people who are actually going to be doing most of the investing in your campaigns. Crowdfunding is essentially a way to take friends and family finance and make it more transparent, more scalable, and more standards-based. So there's some questions here around what is the size of your social network? I mean, how many people are on your Facebook? How many people do you have on Snapchat, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, all these other social platforms? And then thinking about, okay, well, if I think about that, I can plot out, I've got 500 friends on Facebook, I've got 4,000 connections on LinkedIn, I've got whatever, right? 10,000 people on Twitter. But then how interactive are those people, and how much are they going to potentially invest into my campaign? And think about this in put together a spreadsheet, literally. It's got like the names of all the social platforms down the side, and then across the top you're going to ask how many connections do I have? What percentage of my social network is actually going to invest in my business? And it's going to be less than 10% across the board, probably less than 5%. And then how much are each person in my social network is going to actually invest in my business? In the US, the average investment for investment crowdfunding is about $1,000 from regular investors. And then being able to calculate based on the number of people in your social network, the amount you think they're going to invest, how much you can raise from your existing social network. And in most cases, there is a gap between what you can raise from your existing social network and what you need. And what that means is you need to think about how can I expand and grow my social network, and how can I make my social network that I currently have more active and more engaged. And those are really the kind of the key questions, and I'll talk more about that in a later slide. In building your social network, have you guys ever heard of a guy by the name of Gary Vaynerchuk? Okay. Okay, so you can look him up on YouTube. His family immigrated from Belarus to the U.S. His father had a liquor store. He turned it into a $60 million a year wine business, and he did it through social media and YouTube. And so now he has a very successful social media marketing agency that does about $100 million in revenue a year. He's on YouTube all over the place. You can watch his videos. Some people like him, some people don't. He's got a very strong personality. But he's got a lot of great understanding of how social networks operate. And one of his big things is, if you're going to engage social network, you have to give before you ask. So let's say you've got 1,000 people on your LinkedIn profile, your Facebook friends, right? And most of those people you haven't seen or talked to in years. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere on Facebook, the people you went to high school with get a message from you on Facebook saying, hey, I'm doing this campaign, will you give me some money? And they haven't heard from you in 10 years. And the people you worked with 2 jobs ago are getting the same message at the same time, right? Why would what have you done for me lately, right? And so in these, you've got these offline social networks and you have online social networks. And in the online social networks, there's lots of opportunities for you to give to people on the networks. When people ask questions that you're an expert on, answer those questions online. Is there a way to begin kind of dialogues online? A way to demonstrate you're adding value to these online communities so people see you as an expert, people see you as an active member of an industry, people see you as an innovator. What are the ways you can give and support communities so people have an interest in helping you? Like, oh wow, this person has helped me in the past, and so I'm interested to learn more about what they're doing. You've demonstrated expertise, you've demonstrated you're willing to help people in your community, and so then you're able to, these people are now willing to, give back to you potentially. So there are the offline community builders like trade associations, clubs, organizations like America House, where you can participate actively, get to know people, share interests, give to the things that they care about. And then there's the online social networks as well. And those are really, really, really important. So one of the things we see is that video really matters, right? And in every one of these campaigns, regardless of what type of crowdfunding you're doing, the quality of your crowdfunding video really matters.
Jason, sorry, will this be available for people so they don't have to take pictures?
Yeah. I mean, exactly. We'll provide it to. I'll provide the deck to America House so you guys can download it and the whole thing. No worries. Actually, I've got it on a 2-page Word document, which makes it easier than a slide deck. Quality matters, but you don't have to spend a lot of money on a video, right? I mean, with an iPhone or a Galaxy, you can make a great video and you don't have to spend a ton of money on it, but the quality of how you're going to interact with that video is very, very important. You should do more than just explaining your product. People need to understand who you are, what your business is about, and need to get a sense of more, because when people are making a crowdfund investment, it's not like I'm buying one share of Apple stock, right? That's a very, that's a very intellectual, clinical exercise, right? I believe in the company, I'm going to invest. When people make angel investments, it's both a mental and an emotional decision. And what you're doing with crowdfunding is, you're asking for angel investors for your business. And so you have to kind of provide them with both intellectual and emotional, kind of opportunities to engage with you and to believe in you as a person, to trust you with their money, and to go on this journey with you of building your business. And so authenticity, I always say authenticity is worth more than all the Facebook ads you can buy, right? And so, marketing is important, but really being authentic about what you're trying to do and what you're trying to build is very, very important. And directly address how much money you're trying to raise, what you're going to do with it, and why you're asking for it, right? I mean, there's a lot of times culturally, people don't like to talk about money in public. They don't like to ask people for money. They don't like to, there's a lot of cultural challenges in every culture around asking for money. It's uncomfortable as human beings because you're asking for help. And so you're putting yourself in a really uncomfortable spot. But the reality is, without this money, you don't have a business, right? Or your business is much more difficult to open and run. And so this is a great experience if you're going to be a business owner and an entrepreneur through the rest of your career, is learning early how to ask people for money and become comfortable with that concept. And being able to have that conversation in a way that makes sense and so you can communicate your needs effectively. And then the thing you should think about are the questions, the unsaid questions, the questions that people don't ask you explicitly, but are actually in their minds, and they will ask many other questions to try to learn the answers to the questions here. Number one, why have you chosen to do this business? Why are you doing this business? Why you, right? Number two, how committed are you as a founder to this business? If I'm going to get married to you and give you my money, are you committed to as a founder? Are you really in this for the long haul? Do you really, because it's hard to start a business and it's hard to run a business, are you really in it? Number three, if I give them the money, what's this business owner's chances of success? Do I believe this person has what it takes to make a successful business? And then because I'm giving you my money, I expect to get a return on my investment. This is not a donation. This is not charity. This is, I want my money back and I want to make 2x my money back or 5x my money back. Do I really believe that this entrepreneur can deliver that return? Right? And so those are the questions that they may not ever ask you, but that's the questions that every investor has in their minds. Number 9, no one likes to be the first person on the dance floor at a party, right? And we've all been to those parties. And a crowdfunding campaign is a bit like a party. So let's go back to my other scenario where I was talking about it. It's day 1 of my campaign. And I preload my mass email to everyone in my address book and everyone in my LinkedIn and everyone in my Facebook. And I press the send button, and simultaneously 10,000 people across all my social networks get a message that I'm raising money. And I get lucky, and somebody in the audience says, oh wow, I'm curious what Jason's doing. I'm going to click the link and look at the campaign. And I look at the campaign and I've got $0 from 0 investors. And I look like it's like, oh man, failed campaign. Ugh. Click, close, done. You've lost that person because they've seen an empty dance floor. You need to pack the dance floor before you invite the people to the party. So what you have to do is you have to pre-fill your campaign. This happens all the time in angel investing and VC investing. What you're doing is, when you're creating your campaign, you're creating this giant spreadsheet of everybody you know and how you know them and how close are they to you, right? So there are the people that are your immediate family members. They're the extended family. They're the people who you are very close friends with. They're people you are good friends with. They're people you used to work with. They're people that you met once at a conference, right? And they're getting farther and farther away from you and less likely to invest. So what you need to do is organize your potential investors in concentric circles, right? That say, okay, the first circle of people are going to be the people that I can literally go up to and say, I need your money, right? Like the people who you can have that direct of a conversation with, your closest friends and your closest family. And say to them, I don't care how much you give me, but whatever you're going to invest in this business, I need it on this day, right? I need it on day 0. I need it within this 24-hour window. And then so you're building that up so that you're only going to release your first email to those very closest people on day 1. Not to the world, no blog announcement, no PR, nothing. You get as many of those people to actually give you that money in the day 0. And then on day 1 or day 2, then you go to the next concentric circle of people. That next group of people that's a little bit further away from you, but people you still have a close relationship with. People you can send the message to, and then maybe you follow up with a text message, you follow up with a phone call. Hey, did you get my thing about my campaign, whatever. So by the time that the people you worked with at your last job get your message, you're at like 50% of your goal, right? And so then these people who remember you from when they used to work together say, oh, wow, that's really cool. She's halfway to her goal. I want to help her out. I want to find out more, right? Because then it looks like you're succeeding. So statistically speaking, you need to get to about 25 or 30% of your goal within the first 2 weeks of your campaign in order to be successful. Because you have to generate momentum. You have to generate momentum, which generates more momentum. So really focusing your campaign so you start out very small and then grow it and grow it and grow it. And so you're not doing like announcements to blogs or live videos or other things like that until you've reached 30 or 40% of your campaign goal. And then you can go wider and more expanded with the amount of marketing and public relations that you want to do with your campaign. So it's really like a military exercise. It has to be very, very disciplined to be successful. This is why I was talking about how much planning this takes. While the campaign itself may only take 4 to 8 weeks, the planning phase takes between 3 months and 9 months usually of preparing for this. Just to not full-time work, but just the elapsed time of re-engaging your social networks, talking to people again, really thinking through your video, making sure your pitch is tight, getting your financials ready to go. Starting a business is hard. Growing a business is hard. And this is what it takes to do that. And by the way, all of this is great training for when you want to go on, if you want to raise money from venture capitalists or larger angel investors, or want to talk to strategic investors who may be a large corporation, see if they might be willing to invest in your business. All of this is incredible preparation for that because they will require the same things and more. And if you've done this already, you'll have a great foundational training for raising money at larger scales. Creative nagging is really, it's very, really important because if you're gonna do this campaign for 8 weeks, you can't keep sending the same Facebook message, give me money. Did you give me money yet? Can you give me some money? Can I have some money? How about some money, right? I mean, you can't do that, right? You have to think of how do I create creative ways through public relations, through social media, through vloggers and bloggers and social media influencers to be able to use the crowdfunding campaign to demonstrate your expertise in your industry, to show how your product is useful for customers, to demonstrate your leadership in a sector. How can you create information that is, we would call it like editorial content, where you're demonstrating expertise and that includes this information about your capital raise in it. So you're using very creative ways to give information, expertise, and the ask all at the same time. So you're not just asking for money, every day. And how do you create this rolling campaign to really engage people over time? And so you're going to build basically a public relations calendar for your campaign in advance. So that day 1, I'm going to do this. Day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. Again, it's like a military campaign to execute this right. Because if you think I'll figure it out as I go along, you're going to fail. Because you're going to pre-write the blog posts in advance. You're going to write the public relations notifications in advance. All these things. Because you'll need to do all sorts of other things in the moment, and you need to be prepared for this. Also, being responsive in the campaigns is very important, because people are going to ask questions. People are going to want to ask questions about your financials, whatever, and all these crowdfunding platforms, Kickstarter and others, have ways for potential investors or potential contributors to ask you questions. The data shows that campaign owners who respond in less than 3 hours to questions have a significantly higher chance of being successful than those that respond in more than 3 hours from the time the question's asked. People expect, because they want to expect that you're taking this seriously, that you're focused on this fundraising. They ask a question. I mean, we all live in the world of the real-time web and instant answers, and so people don't want to wait. And so those fast responses are very, very important. Also, it's also important, especially in places that we work where crowdfunding is new, which is basically everywhere, because everywhere crowdfunding is new. How do you create a bridge between what traditional people will think about how they're raising money and this new way of raising money? How do you bridge that gap? And so sometimes we've seen entrepreneurs have meetups or events or other things in person. So these potential investors can see you in person, can ask questions, can see other people. Maybe it's just a dinner for 6 people. Maybe it's a meetup like this where you give a presentation like maybe on the crowdfunding platform, but people want to see you pitch in person, right? And so there's just different ways you have to think about in your culture, in your industry, in your country. What are the ways you can leverage more traditional ways of communicating into this new form of fundraising? All right, so let's say you're successful. Let's say you're successful and you've raised the money. Now what? So setting expectations is super important. In life, setting expectations is important, especially in fundraising, right? So you just had people who've given you money. Let's say they've given you a total of $200,000 to build your business. They are going to now expect to communicate. So now you have to communicate with your new spouse. How are you going to do that? You should set the expectations up front how you're going to do that. Am I going to get an email once a month from you as a business owner, giving me a quick update, bullet points of what's happened? Are you going to do a quarterly Facebook chat and answer questions that way? Are you going to have a meetup if people are in the same place? How are you going to communicate the financial success or challenges of your business? And what way you're going to do that? It's very, very important. Also, it's always better to communicate bad news early than late. Now that goes against everything in human nature, because people want to not talk about the bad stuff and to try to fix it and keep it private. That's what human nature tells us to do. That's what our cultures all tell us to do. But over and over again, when investors know, every investor I know, I'm also do venture capital investing, I would much rather have a phone call early from one of my companies telling me they have a problem, because if they tell me early, maybe I can help solve the problem. If you tell me too late, and it's too late to fix the problem, then the business is dead and my investment's gone. But if you give me a chance to respond and to help you, I will. And most of the time, that's what happens. Most of the time, investors are going to want to be successful, because let's say you have 100 investors in your investment, in your company. What are the chances that maybe one of those people is a CFO of their company? Or maybe someone else is a sales manager of their company, and I'm having a problem with sales, and maybe they can help you. And that's what venture capitalists do, is they bring experts to help their companies to be successful. So you can leverage crowdfunding to have your whole group of experts, all the investors in your business, to help you with your business if you'll tell them early enough. And so communicating early, even bad news, is really, really important. Next is do what you say you're going to do. I know that sounds really simple and really basic, but people forget. Do what you say you're going to do. And if there's a change, then communicate it. Also, showing them, not just telling them. So if there are ways for you in your ongoing communication, whether it's in the fundraising process or afterwards, to show people, like, here's the prototype, or here's the production facility for our product, or here it is on store shelves, or here's some customer testimonials. Giving people that interaction, letting them really know how people are reacting to your product that they've invested in, is very powerful. Ultimately, what this is all about is, if the crowd invests in you, that's validation that you are a believable entrepreneur and that you have a product people might want to buy. If you can actually execute on your vision and actually do what you say you're going to do, you're going to have increased interest for partnership, for more investors, and more customers. So it really helps you to grow your business overall. And then last, what happens if you fail? What happens if you wanted to raise $200,000 and you didn't make it or anywhere close? Now what? So, and a really important thing to remember is, and this isn't true throughout this process, is thanking people every step of the way, especially if you fail. Because people were willing to give you money, and you should thank them for that willingness and explain what happened. But but thanking people at all steps of this process are really important because they're going to be responsible for your success. So you might also think about, the product market fit. People talk about product market fit. Is my product something people really want to buy? Maybe I need to change some things in my product to make it more appealing. So one example of that is the ice cooler company I mentioned at the beginning that raised $13 million. That was the third try at crowdfunding that they did. The first two campaigns that they launched failed. The product wasn't right. But each time they went back and they modified and enhanced and improved the product. And finally, the third time they brought their product back to Kickstarter, it worked. And so maybe it's a chance of you modifying your product or modifying your pitch to be more appealing. However, there are some things where there's just not a match. Like maybe this idea or this concept that you have that you really believe in, there just isn't a market for it. And maybe it's like, well, okay, let me go back and think about a new concept. It's a chance, if you get that opportunity, it's painful, but it's also a blessing because you've saved yourself a lot of time and energy going after this thing that doesn't have a market. And there's really a lot of benefits. The last point I would say is there are a lot of benefits that happen that you get out of doing crowdfunding that are not financial. That you will gain these benefits whether you succeed or whether you fail in your campaign. And so we worked with a group of entrepreneurs who were creating green technologies in Kenya. And we worked with six companies. And of the 6 companies, only one successfully reached their funding goal. The rest did not. But in every case, those other 5 companies, they gained new customers for their businesses, significant number of new customers because of the public relations that had happened around the campaigns. They had more media exposure. They had more, 2 of them got strategic investors, so large businesses that wanted to invest in their companies. And they also got strategic partnership opportunities as well. So the visibility is good, and the increased exposure is good. And the opportunity for you to be, the experience of standing in front of a group of people and talking to them is an invaluable experience. So there's a lot of good opportunities and good knowledge and learning that come from crowdfunding and things that can potentially benefit your business over time as well. So those are the 12 tips I wanted to share with you today. And now I want to just kind of leave the balance of the time open for questions and comments to make this as useful for you guys as possible. So thank you again.
First of all, thank you for a great and useful lecture. And my question is, what is the mechanism of getting money? I mean, do I need a bank account? Do I need a bank account in the USA if I'm going worldwide with my project? What can you say about it?
So, yes, you need a bank account. In most cases, if you're going to do regular crowdfunding, there's a bank account required. Kickstarter requires a U.S. bank account. Indiegogo does not. And then from an equity crowdfunding perspective, and that's not currently really legal here in Ukraine, but in other countries where it is legal, like the UK or Germany or Spain, you have to have a bank account. There's usually the crowdfunding platform itself is the technology platform. The money is collected usually at an escrow agency, so that it manages the money until you reach your crowdfunding, reach your goal. When the goal is reached, then the escrow company releases your shares to the investors, and they release the cash to you. So that way, it happens simultaneously. And usually, it happens only when you reach your funding goal. So you're not like, if I send you a check on Tuesday, you're not getting the money on Wednesday, right? Like you have at the end of the campaign. Then if you've reached your goal, then you get the capital. Sure.
There will be a need of additional contract with escrow company, between escrow company and crowdfunder.
Yeah, and so usually there are the crowdfunding platforms have their escrow service already. That's part of the service they offer. So you as an entrepreneur don't have to figure out the escrow situation. Usually that happens as part of the crowdfunding platform.
What are the legal aspects of these relations? Are there any treaties or how is it formed? What are the legal aspects of crowdfunding? What document do I get when I invest?
So you would get a share certificate of the stock that you purchased. Let's say you own 100 shares of my business. You would get what's called a share certificate, which that entitles you to those 100 shares, and that could be electronic or could be a physical document. It depends. And then you sign a subscription agreement, which means you're subscribing to the shares offering that I have. That says that in exchange for $100, you're getting 100 shares of my business. And it outlines the rights and responsibilities that you have as a shareholder in my business.
I will receive it from Kickstarter or from you.
So with Kickstarter, with donation and with rewards crowdfunding, those contracts do not exist because you're not buying shares of my business. You are pre-purchasing my product. Make sense?
Yes, but how can I prove that I make donation?
Well, you get a receipt. You get an electronic receipt that's emailed to you, and also it's available on the website. And then the business owner then communicates with you over time about how when you're going to get your product and fulfillment. There are also companies now that specialize in the fulfillment of these products. So you may have a prototype, but obviously the difference between making a prototype of a product and being able to produce 10,000 versions of that product are very different skills. And so there are now a whole industry of companies that will take your crowdfunded successful product and then will be able to help you industrialize it. So it can be made on a factory production line, and then the logistics associated with shipping it out to 1,000 people.
Hello. If I'm launching my own ICO here,
Yeah.
If I'm launching my own ICO, how I can guarantee or how I can provide any proof or just any confidence to my to the people who is buying those shares? I mean, in this case, I mean, what can I give them in return instead of promises?
With an ICO, you're giving people, the coin, right? You're giving people the coins, which is kind of a promise, which is just like a stock certificate.
But it's not necessarily that I will have to do anything else after that. I just can give them coin. How to prevent this fraud?
So this is the challenge. The ICO crowdfunding is a challenge. It's like the rules are still being written about how to do that. I don't have a quick and easy answer for you with the ICOs. I think that ICOs are Obviously investing in a small business or a startup is a high-risk investment. Investing through ICOs is like a whole nother level of risk on top. And I think that one of the opportunities in this with ICOs right now is who are going to create the technologies and the trust and transparency tools and the data and analytics tools to enable ICOs to happen in a more trustworthy way.
So actually just my words against whatever. So I can do anything.
With ICOs, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, you mentioned several crowdfunded platforms. Can you advise some sort of pre-assessment tools that founders can get correct questions from clients, from experts before sending or registering this project on crowdfunding platform?
I mean, I think, let me make sure I understand the question. That how can you as a business owner decide which service to use in raising capital? So I think the ways I would say it just takes research. So I would say, just like when you're making any major, like you're making a major purchase of something, right? You want to be able to, you'll do the research you can get from looking online at the different services. And then as part of your research and researching the 10 different campaigns that I mentioned before, if you're able to talk to any of those people, ask them, what was your experience like using this platform? Did they do what they say they're going to do? Were they easy to use? How are how are the things? Because raising money like from Kickstarter and Indiegogo is very different from raising money from investors on the investor side platforms. And so I want to make sure those are very, very different experiences for you as a business owner and for your potential contributors or investors. And so it's important to understand those differences. But really I would say it's like talking to other people, talking to your peers, doing online research. And there are people out there you can find online, some of which are reputable around, like who have crowdfunding expertise who can give you advice.
Thank you. I have 3 questions. My first question is, how useful is it to apply, to do the crowdfunding pages for Ukrainians on American and international platforms? I mean, how likely are Americans to spend money on Ukrainian projects, or is it easier to just do our local crowdfunding platforms? First question. Second question. Yeah.
Let me take them one at a time.
Yep. Okay.
So my jet lag doesn't catch up. I won't be able to remember.
Okay.
So with question 1, I would say that there are advantages of the advantage of using the international platforms is you have lots of people going to them. Most people know what Kickstarter is. You can, but again, the vast majority of your contributors or investors are going to be people already in your social network, right? And so the value of using Kickstarter is that there may be, among the people that you already know, is that there's a sense of legitimacy of the platform. That, I've heard of Kickstarter and whatever, but maybe you get more traffic. But I would not depend on large numbers of foreigners to invest or to contribute, because so far there's just the data shows that the vast majority of contributors and of investors tend to be people already in your circle. There are some cases, there are occasionally when a product or a project goes viral, that you may get millions of dollars from lots of people you've never met before, but that's highly unlikely. So I would say if there's a Ukrainian platform that has good traction, that could be a good option. But there's nothing wrong with using the international platforms. It's just don't expect lots of money from other places. Okay, number 2.
And the second question is about the charity projects, because your presentation was mainly about the business project. Yep. And so if I'm working in an NGO and I would like to raise money for some charity projects, do you have any recommendations or the tools how you can motivate people to give you some money for the good ideas which are not commercial?
So probably the most focused idea I have there is, a lot of times with NGOs, it's typically around, help us do a big thing, or help us fund our annual needs, right? Help us do something large scale. With crowdfunding, especially in the NGO and the donation space, it should be very, very focused. Like, we are raising $20,000 to do this very specific, tangible thing. Because then at the end, you can then show the thing that they contributed to and they feel like they were a part of it. Like, this is a hospital, we need 10 new beds, here are the 10 beds we bought with your money, thank you. Right? Very tangible.
The third question, or can I? Yeah, okay.
Oh.
So I have a question less from crowdfunding world, but more from the world of an investors. Would you consider services like Betterment a better option to invest money than just finding company and getting to know the CEOs of the company, etc., and just let the algorithms do all the work for you? Thanks.
I think that crowdfunding or early stage investing of any kind should be a small part of your overall portfolio, like 10%. And services like Betterment can be great for the majority of your portfolio, right? Whether you pick stocks on your own, whether you use a personal advisor, whether you use the algorithms for Betterment or Wealthfront or those guys, my answer to that is that high risk investing should be only a very small portion of your money you have to invest in total. And there are other ways that you can use other services through people or algorithms to do the rest of those things.
Thanks.
Sure. Can we take one from up front? Oh, great.
I first have one comment because we are right now going through a fundraising campaign on GoFundMe as a Ukrainian NGO. So if anyone is interested in problems that we faced up, please come, I'll share. We right now, during 2 weeks, raised like $4,000 so far, but it's really difficult to appeal to people in the United States, being a Ukrainian-based NGO that targets only Ukrainian kind of problems. So for that, then for financial reasons and for the PR reasons, you have to partner with a US-based nonprofit. The second aspect of GoFundMe is that to be even registered there, you have to be a US registered nonprofit organization. So if you're just a Ukrainian nonprofit and you don't have any partner in the United States, this will not work out for you. We were trying to do the same through Indiegogo. That one is easier. You don't have to be registered in the United States. However, the only way you can take the funds away from United States is basically to have legal entity bank account. So you basically need to have, again, the official entity in US or PayPal, which doesn't exist, unfortunately, in Ukraine. So you'll have to use some person's PayPal outside of Ukraine. But my question is more about the business kind of fundraising. As far as I understand, the bank account that the first gentleman asked about that you have to have in the United States has to be a physical person, since you're pre-selling the goods, I don't know, on behalf of a physical person, or you have to be selling goods, let's say, I don't know, on the same Indiegogo on behalf of the legal entity, and then again it's a legal entity bank account, which is quite problematic with registration in the United States, especially if you don't fly there or you don't have anyone there.
Right.
Thanks. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a Kickstarter or Indiegogo, yeah, it's you have to have there has to be an account, whether it be a person or a company that's registered in the United States for Kickstarter, and it's a problem. And so there are probably some other European platforms that may be easier to work with here.
So. Okay, so thank you for the lecture. And the question is, do you think there is like one successful strategy, or there are very many alternative ones or many drastically different ones? For example, like for nonprofits, when they're doing like annual campaigns, simply their target audience gets tired of them. And one successful strategy would work maybe 2-3 times, wouldn't work anymore. Do you have any kind of recommendation for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the campaign really varies depending on, like you said, like what type of platform you're going to use, how much money you're trying to raise, whether it's, what type of campaign you're going to do. So there's not just one successful strategy. The only thing that I say is the same across all of them is planning. The importance of really planning before you try to execute a campaign, and really thinking all through all these steps really carefully, because then you're going to increase your chances for success. Because during the active 4 to 8 weeks of the campaign, it's going to be almost a full-time job, which sounds kind of crazy, but it's what it's going to be. And so you should be prepared for that. And so that's why the planning phase is so important. Oh.
So following on what you said about planning, you said that PR and communications should follow after you already have raised some amount of money, which is, to be fair, absolutely different from what PR agencies pitch to different startups and founders who are very obsessed about coverage before the event happens, before the funding happens. Right. So do you have any view on that? As in, is there wrong? Is there the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it? And whether PR agencies are running ahead of themselves in trying to do that coverage before? Yeah, I mean,
I'm not a PR expert. I just know what I've seen in the market with crowdfunding, right? Because I know that if you're doing a product launch, like that's very different from I'm about to go raise money from the crowd. So I'm sure there are plenty of reasons, there are plenty of situations where doing the PR the way you're describing it makes total sense, right? And that is the right way to do it. I'm just suggesting in this little world of crowdfunding, when you're thinking about raising money, you're trying to drive traffic to a place to demonstrate you've got, and by having traction, having momentum, that's what drives more momentum in the crowdfunding world. And so if you start from zero, you can certainly do it that way, but that's a lot of Facebook ads, that's a lot of marketing. But if you can start it with the core of people and you can build out that core so there's some traction there, you've got some of it, and then you use the PR to amplify your early success, that's how I would use it more efficiently. Because starting to sell a brand from nothing with nowhere, that's really expensive. If you can have some traction and then use that money to expand your efforts, that's a more efficient use of capital, in my opinion. But I'm just talking about PR in the crowdfunding world, not in the regular world.
Thanks.
One more practical question connected with the previous one. Maybe you can advise us some platform or analytical platform where we can find some more deep analytics according to these platforms, to compare them, what people from what countries support what campaigns, what products, in which platform, something like this. Just to be more effective on choosing the right campaign.
I'm smiling because you've set me up for my favorite topic, which is what we need in the crowdfunding industry. And I've got a room of talented people who are in one of the best software development places in the world, so I'll make my pitch. If you're looking to create a fintech business, this is an incredible opportunity for you, because there are so many new things that are needed to create a viable, scalable crowdfunding industry globally. And the kinds of things you just described are a big part of it. So, there's people think about crowdfunding as like, I'm going to go to a platform and I'm going to do all this work on a platform, right? That's just one aspect. It's like saying, I'm going to go to a stockbroker and everything else just happens magically to buy a share of stock, right? So you need to have crowdfunding platforms, but you also need to have secondary markets for these shares. Who's going to create that? Who's going to create the trust and transparency tools that are going to enable people to do due diligence on someone in Kharkiv when I live in Kyiv, right? How am I going to create due diligence, escrow and title and transfer and legal and accounting services that can use AI and big data to analyze, to compare construction business in this city versus construction business in that city, to look at, do the financials make sense? How do I know this is a legitimate business versus a fake business? How can I analyze the social network? How can I analyze my social network efficiently to know who's in my social network based on the analyzation, the NLP and analyzation of their media posts and everything else, who are going to be most likely to be able to be interested in investing in my business? You know, who's going to create those services? And then also the kind of metric services. Who can create? How can we use the blockchain? To the earlier gentleman's question, how can we use the blockchain to create more surety and more certainty around ICOs? How, you know, people talk about smart contracts all the time. How do we create a smart contract that can help ICOs become actually more viable, more sustainable, more trustworthy? These are all great technology challenges that somebody is going to figure out. And someone will create a scalable SaaS business that can make a lot of money and create a kind of a game-changing opportunity for businesses around the world. And so just thinking about all the things that are required to make a financial system work and how we could create versions of those solutions in the crowdfunding world. You know, just like I said, there are businesses now that will handle all the logistics of getting your product you created for your Kickstarter project from the factory in China to your purchasers globally. That's a service that was only created in the last 2 years. And so there are many other businesses that can be created to solve these challenges that would be really easily solved by software. So that's my pitch.
What is that service? How's it called?
The
distribution one.
Oh, there's it's called Dropship, and there's another one that's I'll look it up after. Come see me afterwards. I can look it up. But yeah, there are definitely those different kind of products that are out there.
Thank you for presentation. I have two questions. How do you define potentially successful projects? How do you do this? How
do I define? Meaning, how would someone make a decision on what to invest versus not invest?
Yes.
How do you? So that's sort of so investors make very personal decisions, right? So everybody has their own way of thinking about investments, right? And so, you know, like I was saying earlier, it really comes down to, if you're asking for my personal, like I'm looking at an early stage business, right? So I want to know the founder is the most important thing. Because whether you have an idea or even if you've got revenue and a product and a service already running, you're a small business, so it succeeds or fails based on the founding team, whether that's one or two founders. Personally, I like companies that have two founders because it's really hard to start a business by yourself, and you've got a co-founder, it makes it much, much easier. You can lean on each other. Also, like, do I believe that the market is big enough? Is the market big enough so that you can be successful in it? Do I believe in your expertise and your willingness to succeed, and how much are you committed to the business? Do I believe in the financial projections you put together? Do they make sense to me? Am I willing to give you my money and know that it'll take 5 to 10 years to get a return on that money as a startup business? That's just realistic. Because when someone gives you that money as a startup business, they have to understand it's going to be several years before they're going to probably see a return, because it just takes that long for a business to become successful. And those are some of the questions I ask.
Second question, you told that you are an investor. What was the last project you invested in?
Last project I invested in, so I work with a company in Hong Kong called Vector Ventures. I'm a venture partner there. And so we invest in early and mid-stage businesses. We invest across all sectors except for pharma and healthcare, and we invest globally. About half of our portfolio is in the US, 40% is in Asia, 10% in Europe. We do Series A and seed investing and Series B investing. And so the last company we invested in was called FinRa. It's a fintech company in the US, which provides services. It provides one of these solutions in the crowdfunding market. So what it does is it created an API that connects traditional banks with peer-to-peer lenders. So in the US, the biggest problem with the peer-to-peer loan space is not enough Americans know about their availability. I know it sounds strange, but most Americans still are trying to figure out this whole P2P space, or don't even know about it. And so most small business owners still go to a traditional bank to ask for a loan. And when they get turned down, they have nowhere to go. So what FinRa does is they've created a software API that connects the banking back-end technology systems to online lenders. So when I'm sitting in the bank and they say, no, I'm not going to loan you money, the bank manager can say, well, would you like us to forward you on to our online partners and they can evaluate your loan? Yes, click. And that goes to then 7 online lenders. And if any of them succeed in making the loan, within 24 hours, I have my money. So that's a pretty interesting business because it's business to business. It's all software driven. It scales really nicely. You've aligned all of the different interest groups. Everybody gets paid along the value chain. Sure.
How do you think who is doing the most great job in investing? Like what's your main? How do you think what is the best seed investing companies? Maybe Andreessen or Greylock Partners, and who is your competitors of your fund?
I mean, look, Greylock, Andreessen, Sequoia, Kleiner Perkins, those are all obviously, kind of platinum investors. As far as competitors with our fund, I mean, we're focused a little bit differently. Those guys are incredible investors who've been incredibly successful. They're focused very much in Silicon Valley. They primarily invest in Silicon Valley and maybe a few other spots. Where Vector Ventures, what we try to do is we invest in businesses that want to globalize. So we help businesses from the US come to Asia. We help businesses in Asia that want to expand into other regions. That's kind of our niche. That's where we try to add value. So we're not just a check with some money, but we also add value in some other strategic ways.
So maybe you looking for opportunities in Ukraine, yes, and maybe there will be some incubator or some accelerator.
We're a global fund. Happy to learn new things about Ukrainian businesses.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for taking your time and
Sure.
coming here and providing us with this priceless knowledge, especially since our crowdfunding industry and just investment industry is at its infancy, to say the best. I have a curious question, because when it comes to investment from venture capitalists or during seed funding stages, you have this negotiation process with investors or potential investors where you negotiate the shares, the vision for your company, you outline the roadmap, etc.
Yep.
How does it work with crowdfunding, especially in the cases where what you ask for is exceeded in terms of payments? How do you split the shares? And what kind of say do investors have in your company and in its future?
That's a great question. I think the way I would think about that is if you're going to, let's say you're a company, you're going to raise money. And we talked about, starting your, getting to 25% of your initial goal or getting to that first tranche of capital from people you know or from other investors. You can treat those investors the way you would treat a lead investor in a traditional round, right? Someone who helps set the terms. And so you're really those early investors are people you can work with and figure out how much of my company am I going to sell, what price per share, how am I going to communicate. So you can use those people as a kind of a proxy for a traditional lead investor, and then you're really in the position then to offer terms. Like these are the terms, because you already have these are the terms that the first 25% of our round have accepted. So these are the terms, and then people can make a decision whether or not they want to invest in you or not. You can always take feedback and have dialogue, but the deal terms should, at some point have to be set.
Do you set the terms before you start crowdfunding campaign or once you're receiving?
Yeah, I mean, I think you would want to, just like with any fundraising, you want to think carefully about your raise. And when you do that, you want to think about what are other companies in my region, in my industry, in my sector, what are they raising at? How much have they raised? How do I compare to them? And how do I create terms that are compelling? Because as founders, it's easy to start doing the math so much where you're trying to maximize for valuation or maximize for those points. I would suggest to you, having been on both sides of the table as an investor and as an entrepreneur, don't try to game the system for maximum, absolutely every penny you can drive out of valuation, especially in your first round of capital. Think about it like what are the averages in the industry for your stage in your industry company, and what are people successfully raised at? Because realistically, sophisticated investors will use that as their benchmark. Because if people are raising $1 million at a $5 million valuation in your industry, in your sector, and you say, I want to raise $1 million at a $10 million valuation, most investors are going to be out, right? So just like understand that a lot like real estate, it has to do with comparables. People are doing, what are the comparable investments in your industry or sector that you should look at? And so that should factor heavily into your decision about valuation. And then obviously, if you've got something special, something unique, something incredible that is just not accounted for in those other models, and you can have leverage to have those conversations about having a higher valuation or selling less of your company or whatever. But I mean, just keep in mind what the market is telling and track that with your conversations. Because because an unreasonable entrepreneur in those conversations is investors walk away.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I'm not sure that my question is relevant, but I'll try anyway. Have you been participating in crowdfunding campaigns for political campaigns? And can you share the most important takeaways from those experiences, if you have?
I avoid politics.
You avoid politics.
Yeah, no, I haven't participated in any political fundraising, and I don't plan to. I've got plenty on my plate dealing with business fundraising. I like that.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Thank you.
May I ask you a question from the side of a businessman? For example, I have a brilliant idea. I put it on the crowdfunding platform, and then somebody else realizes it. Is there any protection from the side of platform of my idea?
Sure. Intellectual property always comes up.
With some variation.
Pardon me?
My idea will be realized with some variations.
Yeah.
A little bit different.
Possible. I have a question. So people stealing my idea is something that comes up everywhere. Do you guys have has there been a direct example where you or someone you know has had an idea stolen like that? No, but I'm saying not being convicted, but just like you've saying not that a government or court case, but just like I had an idea or someone I knew had an idea and it was stolen.
Facebook, it's possible.
Okay, Facebook. There you go. It's possible. It's possible. It's possible anywhere. My point is that in most places I go to, it's like that is a very real concern, but the actual number of times that it happens is much lower than the concern level. Second thing I would say about it is there's no one who's going to be able to execute your idea with the same vision and execution that you will. And so you have there's what you have is unique, right? There may be variations, but what you have is still unique. Third is I've had plenty of late evenings over drinks talking about great ideas that I never did a thing about. Execution is everything. And most people are never going to execute because it's hard. It's really hard. Now, talking from a legal perspective, what I would say is this. Two things. Number one, on crowdfunding platforms, especially for investment, you have, there's the information that you make publicly available on the web that's available to anybody to interest people in learning more. But on every one of the equity or equity platforms particularly, you have to sign in, you have to register as a user and then be granted access to my private documents before you can review them. So you want to invest in my business, I want to know who you are first. So you have to register as a user, and when you do log in and look at my financials or look at my business plan, I'm going to know when you logged in, I'm going to know what pages you looked at, I'm going to know if you printed anything out, and I'm going to know, what you did with those documents. So again, doesn't stop someone from stealing it, but it makes it more difficult. And obviously, anytime you have a chance to prevent and to do any kind of intellectual property protection with an attorney, you should. I mean, if it makes sense, you should do it. I just think that I would just take all the normal precautions you would normally want to take. The crowdfunding, again, doesn't change the basic rules of human nature, but I think that I wouldn't let that get in the way of executing on a great idea.
Hello, thank you again for a presentation. And my question is about relationship with investor. I know the story when the magazine was invested, and then suddenly with time investors started to dictate his rules, and it ended up with closure of this online outlet because it didn't work out as the author wanted. How to start in relationship with your investor to prevent such things in future?
Was this investor like a majority owner or own a large percentage of the business?
It was like the large one who supported it.
So one of the things you get with the crowdfunding is you have a larger number of smaller investors, and so you have less chance that one investor can dictate everything to you. Excuse me, but again, it's really about communication, and if you clearly communicate up front and in the beginning of the campaign what people are investing in and why, and you regularly communicate what you said you're going to communicate, and you do the things you said you're going to do, you will dramatically reduce the chances of having an investor that becomes a bad actor, right? Who becomes someone who gives you trouble. It doesn't prevent it 100% of the time, but it will significantly reduce the chances that happens.
Question from the IT sector, because it's kind of fun finding investment in the IT sector, since you can always outsource the programming to any location in the world. Do you have any recommendations if, for example, we are starting an application or creating an application which will go globally? Do you have any suggestion on where we should find the investors? So should we use some local platform and our social connections within the country, or should we already go global, advertise? Any pros and cons there?
Is this for an equity raise?
Seeding. It's seed capital.
Seed capital, okay. I think leveraging your social network, and I don't think you need to go global for the first seed capital. I think, do you have any customers yet, or is it still in the very beginning?
It's still MVP stage development.
Okay. I would stay local. I don't think there's anything to be gained by trying to raise money globally at this point, unless there may be something about your specific business that makes that different. But my general answer at that point would be stay where you have traction, stay where you have a social network, where you have credibility and trust and reputation, because that's where you're going to raise seed capital from most easily. And then after you raise that capital, if you want to go more broad, like now we have 1,000 customers and we're growing into 2 other countries, then thinking about a broader outreach and maybe a more global platform may make sense. But I think it's leveraging your strengths as kind of close to home would be good to start with.
Thank you.
To get VC investments, you have to have a scalable idea. For example, your LTV have to be maybe 2 or 3 times more than customer acquisition costs. And can you tell about how you evaluate companies, how to invest in numbers and something on unit economics? Thank you.
Yeah, unit economics are really important. I think that different investors will tell you that unit economics are important at different stages of the life cycle of a business. At a seed stage company, you really don't know what your unit economics are yet. You have some guesses, and you hope that they're right. And only after you have sold 1,000 of them will you have any sense of whether your guess was right or wrong. So the seed stage investor, you're coming back to investing in the entrepreneur, the business owner. And your belief in them. After you get to a more Series A or Series B type of investment, where you have enough data to demonstrate whether your unit economics are accurate or not, and then you can modulate your business based on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for great tips. And I have no questions, just quick remarks. Ukrainian project raised almost $2 million in Indiegogo, and Kickstarter starts of this year. It's almost 34 campaign was succeed, and most of them was launched by PR agencies in Ukraine. I mean, Ukrainian projects. And I'm agree that if you looking for, if you developing, for example, a global product and you're looking for a global audience, you go to the global platform, Indiegogo, Kickstarter, wherever, I don't know. And if you're NGO, for example, which working in Ukraine, we have great local big idea, which very normally works in Ukraine too. Thank you.
Thank you. What do you think are the biggest opportunities on a global scale for crowdfunding, maybe in terms of verticals or emerging markets or maybe even corporations using crowdfunding?
We've seen some corporations use crowdfunding to test market new products, new product extensions. From a country basis, Mexico, Thailand, Malaysia have all recently launched equity crowdfunding. So it'll be interesting to see how those very different countries utilize it. Another thing that's interesting is from a sector perspective, in Muslim majority nations, Islamic finance and crowdfunding is very compliant with Islamic finance principles. And so in countries where there's a large Muslim population, there could be interesting ways of engaging investors and business owners through those forms of finance as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to customize and localize, these online tools so that they are appropriate for, most markets.
Sorry, can you elaborate a little bit on the Islam finance system?
Sure. So it basically is Islamic finance principles don't allow the charging of interest. And so you have to set up structures that enable you to gain financially from an asset while owning it. And so you set up it's setting up a structure so that you allow that to happen and then provide a return to investors based on rents. And so it's community-based financing, it's shared risk, and it's kind of shared risk and reward between you and your investor.
Thank you.
All right, I think we've exhausted everyone.
Thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
And have you invested in some Ukrainian projects, maybe?
I haven't, not yet.
But maybe did you see some of them and you like them, or?
I haven't seen. I'm sure they've existed. Obviously, they've been very successful. I just haven't seen those particular campaigns, but I'd be happy to look at them.
But for example, if you will see two campaigns, Ukrainian and American, will you prefer American, or it's no difference for you?
It would depend on a lot of things, right? It would depend on if I understood the industry, if I really wanted the product, if I knew the entrepreneur. There's just a lot of factors, just like anything, right? It depends on a lot of factors on that.
Thank you.
Sure.
I guess this will be the final one from me, I promise. As an investor, what documents do you pay the most attention to? Would it be the financials, the monetization perspective, just the idea, or some other factors, or the entrepreneurs you mentioned so often? And can I have two perspectives here from you? One as a crowdfunder or paying through the crowdfunding campaign where the investment would be limited, $20 or something, and as a financial investor or venture capitalist who would put up 50 grand or something like that. Thank you.
So the things that are important are not really documents, but the things that are important are the entrepreneur and the founders. And answering those 4 questions that I had in my presentation, those are the things that I'm wanting to know. Secondly is looking at the financials. And for a seed or Series A stage in company, those financials are a guess. You're going to put those financials together and with the best of intentions and belief that they're accurate. And the only way we're going to know if they're accurate or not is by letting the business go, by making the business work and making an investment. which takes me back to why the founder is so important, why founders are so important. But unit economics, so meaning, am I going to make a profit on every item that I sell, every service that I sell? And initially, most businesses don't, but over time, you want them to become profitable. And so understanding how that there's a plan to actually get to profitability, because I want my money back at some point as an investor, and I want it back with a multiple. And so I need to see some numbers that I can believe based on the size of the market being big enough and the distribution of those products being rational, and the numbers all kind of work, so I believe in those things. But it's just a sense of having looked at, many, many deals over, a series of years, that you sort of see patterns and you see kind of what can be successful and what cannot be. But there's also, there's a human element of guesswork that comes into it that is not all, there's only so much that we can do with data. And at the end of the day, there's a human decision you have to make about investing or not.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for lecture and one question, just practical. How you will looking for Ukrainian project, or how you find all other projects as an investor?
Oh, how do I find projects?
How you will looking for Ukrainian projects in the future?
I mean, I think that it would be people like sending me information about them. Yeah.
Directly.
Yeah.
Nice.
I will need your email.
Okay. Happy to give it to you.
Are you investing only on crowdfunding, or you have another investment like?
We invest in mostly. My focus is financial technology.
Financial technology.
So that's where all my focus is financial technology. Yeah.
I guess we should say thank you for Jason for coming to Ukraine and for this great presentation and Q&A session.
Thank you all very much for coming.